The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the DemandTools MassEffect training session. This is Olivia. I'm the Product Adoption Manager at CRM Fusion, and I'll be giving the session today. Everybody is in listen-only mode, but if you have questions, I want you to be able to ask them. So let's go ahead and use the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can type your questions in there. I'll keep an eye on it. If any questions come up, I will read them out loud and then provide the answer back so everybody can benefit. And you guys don't have to wait for me to ask if there's questions. Feel free to type them in as they come to you. If it's something where maybe it's jumping ahead or falling behind a little bit, that's okay. We'll just address it when we have a good stopping point or when the appropriate time comes up. This session is also being recorded, so if you'd like a recording, the best way to request that is if you click this tech support tile. So right now I'm logged into DemandTools, if that wasn't clear, and you're seeing the DemandTools Today page. So you have that tech support tile, which will launch the log a case page. You can also find that on our website under support, and then open a technical case. Right, and there is a reason for a recorded webinar request at the bottom, and then just tell us which one you want and we'll send you off a recording. You can even do that for ones that you haven't attended yet. So, sometimes the schedule just doesn't jive with yours, and if you need to get a recording, you can always ask for that. Even those of you who don't qualify for technical support, you're going to want to make your request that way, okay? Anytime a recorded webinar request comes through, it's always fulfilled. All right, it looks like everybody's logged in, so we're going to go ahead and get going. Once again, today is for MassEffect, but before we dive into the module, I just want to hit on a few points on the main screen here. Like I said, I am logged into a DemandTools instance. You can see the Salesforce org ID that I'm connected to down here, so if you're curious about yours, you can see it there. You can also see your username, okay? So if you're logging into multiple orgs, that's an easy way to find that out. To access our self-help and search our knowledge base of solutions, you got the self-help tile, the live training I'm sure you've seen because you're here, but this also houses the training for all of our products, DemandTools, People Import, Dupe Blocker, and Job Builder. And then, of course, the tech support tile. Down below, we have some social media stuff, so our latest tweets, and then how to stay in touch with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. If anybody is looking at their screen and maybe when they log into DemandTools, you guys see an upgrade banner. Upgrades are always free, so go ahead and install that. It's always a good idea to be on the most current version, just to make sure you're compiled on the most readily available Salesforce API and have all the good features and bug fixes and stuff that comes along with upgrading software. All right, the version you're seeing here, 270.36, it is the most current version. So if you aren't seeing that upgrade banner, then you're good to go. Over on the left, we have MassEffect. And sorry, I was just questioning if this was the MassEffect section. And then the little question mark to the left, if you click that, that'll launch the MassEffect specific help docs, which you can get to through that self-help link, but sometimes, rather than navigating through the tree, if you're not really sure where things are just yet, this will get you there, and then you can see the breadcrumb trail. So if you are navigating through, you know where to start. So MassEffect is our ETL tool, extract, transfer, load, and it's in different terms like the data loader on steroids. So if you're familiar with Salesforce's free version called the data loader, you're going to have a basis for how things are going to function here. If not, don't worry about it. I think we'll figure it all out together as we go through today. So let me open up the module, and if you click on the words MassEffect, it does launch the module. And if you look over on the right, you'll see the different operations that this module is capable of. Okay, so we can update existing data, insert new records, upsert, delete existing records, export data, and then also undelete from the recycle bin. Now, what you can do inside MassEffect is going to be dependent on your Salesforce profile. Okay, so DemandTools isn't a way to circumvent your Salesforce security. We follow your Salesforce security and all the different profile settings. So if you can't delete data in Salesforce, you can't delete it here through DemandTools either. If there's a required field when creating a record, you can't create those records through here without fulfilling that field requirement or, let's say, a validation rule. Okay, so I think we get it. Everything applies. And how we work with the data in MassEffect is with the use of an external spreadsheet. So on the Salesforce side of it, okay, you can see here that we have access to standard and custom tables. So everything that you can see in Salesforce, you're going to have access to here. And it will be dependent on the mode that you're in. So for instance, if I'm in insert mode, and I go down and I see the user table, okay, I can, of course, mass upload users. If I put this in delete mode, because of how Salesforce functions, the user table isn't going to be found here because you can't delete users. You can deactivate them, but you can't actually delete the record. Okay, so some of those nuances you're going to see here, and that's why when we tell you, what are you doing or what you're looking for, we ask you which operation you're in, because that will be indicative of what you're going to see and the actions you have available to you. So MassEffect is capable to work with standard and custom objects and your standard and custom fields. So there's no issues there as far as what you're going to see. But then again, you do have to use an external spreadsheet to facilitate any of these options, including export. And export's where I'm going to start because I think it's just a really easy way to get your feet wet with how the interface operates. And it's slightly different with the export than it is with the other options, because the export option, you're given a little pop-up interface to work with. Now, you don't have to be in export mode in order to export data. But again, having it in export mode is going to give you a clearer view of what your Salesforce access dictates you can export. All right, so if you're in something and you're like, oh, I know I can insert into this table, and then you try to export from it, you may not be able to. Okay, so tossing it in export mode is just a good way to start. And we're just going to export some account. Actually, let's do contact. So you right click on the table. My mouse was a little too quick there, hang on. Right click. Oh. This mouse is gonna kill me. There it goes. And then you see export table pop up and you click that, and now you get the pop-up interface. So, people are like, well, why wouldn't you just use Salesforce reporting? You can do exports through there. True, you can, and if that's where you're comfortable, great. But in DemandTools and MassEffect, we give you some table joining capabilities that may not be available to you in the Salesforce reporting. So this becomes just a bit more flexible. The first thing, now it knows that we're exporting from contacts. That's step one, okay? Step two, I guess, in this process would be telling the system, are we going to export all of our contact records, or do you want to use conditions and just grab a specific subset of the data? I'm just going to pull down contacts in Ohio. So I'm going to go down to mailing state, or whatever state field you use, and then choose your operator. If you're familiar with conditioning elsewhere in the product, conditioning in here functions the same way. All right, and the operators all mean the same thing. Exclamation point equal sign always represents not equal to. Okay, but I'm going to say equals OH or OHIO. Add that condition, and now it's just going to pull down that subset of my data. I could also say things where, the street is not equal to blank. So I want it to be in the state, and I want to ensure that I get data where the street address is populated. Okay, so I can make whatever stipulations I want here. If I wanted to OR conditions together, so if I'm like, yeah, it's fine, we'll get these in Ohio where the street is not blank, or I want to get things in Ohio where the phone number is not blank, because for me, my export is, how can I contact these people? Do I have an address I can mail to, or do I have a phone number I can contact them? So what I'll do is I'm going to add that condition again. So I clicked the button here on the left to reload it up top, and then I added the condition one more time. All right, this is also a way that you can update the condition. So if I wanted to add something in here, let's say, if I click update condition, it updates that one. I can load this one and do the same update if I'd like. Okay. I don't want to actually add PA, so we'll just remove that. But the updating conditions I think is nice because then you don't have to recreate the wheel. But now I'm going to say that the phone number is also not equal to blank and add in that condition. Now, right now, the way those conditions are set up, it doesn't really make much sense. I'd kind of be conditioning myself out of getting any records. So I need to employ my expert mode to do some ORing. And when I do that, I get OR groups to the right, okay? Every condition that has the same OR group number is ANDed to each other, but I want to just AND this one and this one, and then I want to OR it to this one and this one. So these last two, I'm just going to click on that number, type a 2. I'm going to do the same thing for this, for the phone. So now I'm telling the system, pull me back things where the state is always Ohio, so that's consistent, but where the mailing street is not equal to blank, or if the mailing street is blank, where the phone is not equal to blank. Okay, so that's why you could do that. I'm just going to make this real simple, and we're just going to do that. And then over here on the right, I choose the fields I want included in my export, and you're going to have access to standard and custom fields. And the table joining that I was alluding to before is denoted by these plus signs. So for instance, I'm exporting contacts, and any information from my account, other than, let's say, the Salesforce account ID, I need to expand the account table join and then work within here to grab the fields of information that I want from that joined table, like the account name. And then normally, because this is a tiny spot, when I'm done inside of a table join, I just smush it back down and continue on. You know if you're in a table join if you see double lines here, okay? And it can go 3 deep, so, or 4 deep, it just depends. So if you're ever like, I cannot find this field, take a look at how many table joins you're stuck into. All right, so I'm just gonna grab some standard stuff, first name, last name, email, and we'll just do this export. Oops. So, with the export, there's not a whole lot to it other than telling it the conditions of the records that you want to see and then the fields from those records that you want to have brought out. Where the exporting can become a bit more beneficial is like if you're doing opportunities and you want to get stuff about price books and products. The way our table joining works in here is, if you're at, let's say, the price book level, you can traverse up and find out this stuff about the associated opportunity, and then up from there, you can find out stuff about the account associated to the opportunity. So you can get all those levels deep of an export from one object. You do have some export options, so you can append the date and the time to the file name. And if I do export data, it's going to ask me, what type of file I want to export to. And we'll just call these OH contacts. Okay, and you can see the little ticker over here going. When it sits here like this, it's just waiting for Salesforce to pick up the job. Of course, if you were using CSV, you can denote your separator, and you can actually type in here and put in a different separator if you want, okay? And then the encoding, the default, you can use that. If you want to force UTF-8 encoding on like CSV, I recommend that, especially if you're using foreign characters. And that ticker is showing us 31,862 records were written out in 25 seconds. And here's a link to that file, which you can either utilize or just click OK on that pop-up and it'll go away. But if you're like me and often forget where you save things, that link is oftentimes a nice reminder. And then it just looks like a normal export. Okay, you've got the fields and that's it. The nice thing about this export though is, when you do through Salesforce and you have those extra fields at the bottom with some stats about the report, you're not going to have that stuff here. So you don't have to worry about getting rid of that. Look at all this junk we have. All right. And don't forget, guys, if you have questions, feel free to just type them in as they come to you. You can also save your export scenarios. I have my scenarios set up to be saved under Documents in the DemandTools data folder, which you also all have when you installed the tool. And then I created a MassEffect folder. You can do the same thing if you want. That looks like I have that before. Yep, that's fine. So if I ever wanted to load up an export scenario, I right-click into the table and then click Load Scenario. And it remembers my settings, and of course I can go through and tweak whatever I need to. One of the other things you can do in here with exporting, as you can see here, you can export deleted or archived records. So if something's still in your recycle bin, you can export it, or if something's been archived. If you're doing, where's the other one, attachments, you can have this decode, so you can actually get the file out, not just information about the file that's attached, but you can get the decoded Excel file and have an Excel file written out to your machine. Careful when you're doing that though, because obviously if you're exporting your entire attachment table, that can get huge. So, but there is a way to get those decoded files exported, which is nice. All right, so exporting, pretty straightforward, I think. If I'm wrong, you can tell me though. And let's go ahead and we're going to look at delete and undelete, because again, those are the functions that have the least amount of features, right? They just work the way they work, so easiest to digest. If we put ourselves in delete mode and expand the table, you're going to notice the only field it's looking for is the Salesforce ID, because in order to delete, that's all we need is the Salesforce record ID. Keep in mind that when you do delete here, it's a cascading delete, just the way it would be in Salesforce. So if I delete a master detail object, the associated sub-objects are going with it. All right, and we do have to load up a file. So for any other function than export, you're going to be working in this interface, and you do have to supply a file of information so it knows which data to translate into Salesforce, okay? You do that by clicking Select File on the top right, and I believe I have some ID files. Let me just find them. Here we go. So I have an Excel file, which is fine. You can use Excel, Access, CSV, XLSX, ACCDB, and MDB, which is both Access. If you're using Access or Excel, you do have to double click on the worksheet that you want to use, which is also nice because you can have multiple worksheets in a workbook rather than when you use CSV and you just have to have multiple little files if you want to test stuff or need to organize things. So I'm going to work with my IDs only. And just give that a double click. My computer would respond, that'd be nice. There it goes. So 32,093 records are in my data source, and there's the field I have. So I'm in delete mode, which is what I want. I have my contact IDs. I expand my contact table, drag and drop the ID over. So I click with a left click, drag it, and then drop it once it's mapped. And when you see that blue flag, you know that the field is found a home. Double check, it might not be the home you want it. And then if you want to remove something, you right click and have remove, okay, to unmap a field. A lot of people try to drag back, which makes sense to me, but this does not work how it works. I don't want to delete 32,000 records, so we're going to say let's do the first 15. Over here in my control, okay, this is, if you weren't looking over there, let me put the original numbers back. It said 3293. So it's starting at record 1, it's ending at record 32,093. I don't want it to do that. Sure, I want it to start at record 1, but I want it to end after record 15. Okay, so that's also a nice way that you can just work with a test part of your data instead of using an entire file or creating different tabs or creating different files. You can have some control here. You could even tell it on the next round if that goes well, all right, start at record 16 and at record 32,903. All right, so then on the right, we're going to click process. I'm about to delete 15 records. This cannot be undone. Now, let's be clear about this. Deletions, we don't give you a restore file, okay? I mean, your restore file is basically the IDs that you're using to delete them with. These are going to get tossed into your Salesforce recycle bin. We cannot control how long things are kept in your recycle bin. It is based on time and also space. So if space trumps time, then these could be gone quicker than you know it. But because of our undelete option, if they're still in your recycle bin, they can be reversed. Okay, but that's the only way. Once they're out of the Salesforce recycle bin, they have been permanently deleted, and you would have to restore from some sort of backup that you might have. All right, so this is what we like to see at the end of each process, that there were 0 errors. However, had there been errors, they will be listed in your log file. You get 1 log file per day. Okay, so it says that it started, it ended, no issues, and then it was written out to the log file. Also, if there's errors, you can have a show error listing here. So you see that button, now it says hide, but before it said show error listing, and it'll parse out the errors from that log file and just show them here, which I think is also kind of nice. And then let's open up that file. And we worked on this one, so go to record 15. I'm going to log into the Salesforce org, and let's just make sure it's deleted. Oops, don't want that on. All right, record deleted. So now, let's say I was like, oops, that was the wrong subset of data. I actually need to restore that. I can keep this file loaded here, okay? So if I want to flip this to undelete mode, I still have to tell it the IDs, which since I'm undeleting the stuff that I just deleted, I don't have to reselect a file. I can just continue to use this one, but I do have to put it in undelete mode. And then I'll have to go back down to my contact table and remap my field. Still just going to do the first 15. Now click process. Okay, again, 0 errors, that's great. This was the file that that ID that we pasted over that shows it was deleted. Now if I refresh, that file's back, or the record's back because I undeleted it. Okay. So deleting, undeleting, all you need are the record IDs. And again, to be clear, take a look at these guys. These are Salesforce record IDs. It can't be an external ID. It can't be a field that you've marked unique. It has to be the Salesforce ID. And for those of you who might be newer to Salesforce, ooh, that was loud. The IDs, contact IDs all start with 003. Account IDs all start with 001. So if you're ever curious if you have the right ID for the object, the first 3 characters are a good indicator for what they belong to. All right, any questions? I don't see anything popping in, but I will take a moment and just pause in case you need a minute. I'm seeing some repeat names on my trainings that I've been giving these past couple weeks. Somebody is hustling to learn DemandTools, which is awesome. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so let's go ahead and move along. We've got these bottom 3 down. Now we're going to focus on the top 3. And we're going to start with inserting, because again, I think it's just a little bit easier to wrap your head around. And this time, if you wanted to work with a different file, which most of the time, let's face it, when we switch what we're doing, we're switching up files. There's no way to like clear this file out right now. You just click select file and grab something new. Okay, so that was the file I got from our export. That's the one I just selected. Now it is an XLS, so I do have to select my worksheet, even if there's only one. I double click, you can highlight and scroll over here and click use. I just think that button's way far away. So that's why I like double clicking. If my mouse would work. I don't know if the batteries are dying or what. There we go. Okay. So in insert, what are we doing? We're creating new records. So we have to fulfill new record field requirements and you know, whatever else you have set for when you're creating new records. Now this isn't giving me a whole lot of data. Let's see if I can find a different file that has some more information. This is actually the file we were just using. This one has a little bit better information because we've got some address fields and stuff. So then, since I'm inserting contacts, okay, it is going to ask you for the account ID. Okay, and that's again the Salesforce ID. It can only be the Salesforce ID. And if you don't have it, you need to get it, or you're going to be creating orphan contacts, which nobody wants to do because orphan contacts don't provide to be very useful in Salesforce. But what if you're thinking, well, okay, they're all the same account that they're going to, and I just don't have the ID in the file? You can do this. Let's say they're all going to this account here, Urbana Engineer. I'm going to copy out that ID. And one of the nice features in here is you can right click on a field and add a constant. So if that field is supposed to be the same value for every record being created, and maybe you forget to put it in your file, you can add this constant and you don't have to put it in your file. Okay, now if we save this scenario, that constant will be saved with the scenario also. But so now what this is saying is that all of these contacts that I end up creating, let's say I do all 32,000 of them, are going to be associated to this account. Right? And you can do that with any field really except for system field. So for instance, I'm the one creating these contacts because I'm in insert mode. I might not be in Salesforce doing it, but Salesforce is going to see me as the one creating it. So if I don't specify an owner, I'm going to be the owner, just the way it would be in Salesforce if you were manually typing out a record. This is another great place where you can use the add constant on the owner ID, because here it gives you a pick list of people you can choose from. All right, and again, let's just do the first 10 over here. Now notice I haven't mapped anything just yet for my spreadsheet. I do have to map at least one field, but that's it. If that's the only field I want and then I want to add constants for the rest of them, go for it. Now we saw we can drag and drop for mapping. You can also right click on the table and do auto map. Of course, if you're doing auto map, the strong suggestion is that you verify where things have gone, because if they've gone to the incorrect spot, you can remove them and remap them. You can also decide to map one field from your spreadsheet to multiple fields in Salesforce. So, you know, if you're not sure which phone number field it's supposed to go into, or if you want it to populate both because maybe you're phasing out an old field, you can do that. And so even though it's flagged and mapped, if I'm like, oh, I want phone to go to home phone too, that's no problem. If you choose not to map a field, that's also not an issue. We're only going to look at the things that you've mapped. We have no interest in anything else in the spreadsheet other than what you tell us to. Another fun thing is transforming your data as it goes into the system. So oftentimes we get these spreadsheets from trade shows or vendors who just sell us information so we can contact people, and the formatting's not always the prettiest. I don't know why, because that's what they do for a living, but we can make it pretty, or maybe it is nicely formatted, it's just not following the standards that you have in your org. You can right click on a field after it's been mapped and transform. And if you're familiar with MassEffect or PowerGrid, you've probably seen these formulas. The formulas we've put here are the formulas that you really don't have to do anything for them to work. The formula itself is how they work. There's really no interaction other than telling us which field to apply it to. So for country, I'm going to say, let's make sure everything that has a country goes in, we'll put it in long name. So I have this little extra option I mean, the icon, of course, doesn't tell me anything, but I can right click and remove it if I need to change things up. But it allows you to format your data without you actually formatting it. You can just tell the system to do it as it's pushing it in. You can do that on state fields. So let's put the short abbreviation for states. I can do it for my street address. I can do a if it's North American, I can do a, oh, I guess we don't have the street one here, my bad. We have the phone fix, I could do it on phone. I always get those confused. So if my phone number is maybe separated with periods or not just formatted properly, there's no separation, it's just a, 10 numbers in a row. This is North American, but I can use that if you have North American data to standardize. So those right-click options are really beneficial, I think, and time savers. Any field that's not mapped, that's fine. We're just not going to fill anything out for it. But again, if it's required, we need you to put something in there. So we have, oh, and you know what? Sorry, guys. Let me just point out here. When I did my auto map, it took away my add constant on my account ID, and I believe it did it on my owner. It did. So keep that in mind. I always forget, clearly, but it is a good learning experience. That if you auto map after you add constants, the add constants are going to go away. All right, so what I was going to show you was if you right click on a field, before you map anything to it, you can get field info. And it tells you, is it required? No. How long is it? So how long of the data can I put in there? Okay, so those are some nice pieces of field information. So let's go ahead and create these, and I'll just click process. Again, we're just doing the first 10. Oh, and over here, if you're going to use CSV, you can also force it to be read as UTF-8. So before we touch on the pop-up here, the question that's out there, is there a way to look up accounts by account name, or does it have to be ID? When you're making the association of records, it has to be done through the ID. Okay, and if you think about the technical reason behind it, when you're creating a contact, normally we do it from the account page, right? So we don't have to worry about populating that account field. But that account field is a lookup. Lookup fields in Salesforce on the back end are populated by the record ID. All right, so we are completed. Again, 0 errors, that's what we like to see. But if we just look at our log file, you can see how it's building on itself from process to process. What we've also been given is my original data, so the data that I used to create these from this file that I have loaded, plus the IDs that were just created for these records we were making in Salesforce. So it's a nice comprehensive export of, here's what you had in your spreadsheet from D over to the right, okay? Here's what we've added. So here's the contact we just created. Was it successful, true? If it was error, it would tell you, right? But that's what these two columns are for. And I only did the first 10, so that's why we're populated down to field 11. And if I go in, find that ID here. So Alan Dick, he's under Urbana Engineer. Kelly owns him because remember I added that constant. And I made sure that the country was in the long form, the state was in the short. Now it may have been that way in my spreadsheet. Let's take a look. Well, country was not in long form. We changed that. State was in short, so that stayed fine. And it didn't have a phone, so I didn't have to standardize anything there. All right, and what you do with this file after it's spit out to you is completely up to you. We have no preference. We don't reference it anywhere. It's just a nice to have for you so you can keep your data straight. And also, if something goes wrong and maybe you need to undo this, you have those IDs to then process a delete. All right, other question. Is there a deduping feature to prevent the insert of multiple records? Not in MassEffect, no. If you want a deduping feature upon import, I would suggest that you check out our sister product, People Import. If you're a DemandTools user, depending on when you sign up, you probably have a People Import license, but the pricing has changed, so I don't know if that holds true right now. I don't think it does. But check, if you're curious. And People Import, though, is geared for leads and contacts only. All right. If you're working with other objects and you want to make sure that you're not importing duplicates, you can use the Find ID module to do a comparison prior to import, and it'll show you here's all the records where we found a match, and then here's all the records where we didn't. So you know that the records that provided no matches or no results are the ones that you need to import. So the two suggestions, the Find IDs is in DemandTools. People Import is another product of ours and works with just contacts, leads, and then secondarily the account. Now the file that we're looking at here, it's going to be saved in the same spot that your original file came from. So by that, I mean this file. Okay, so this one was on my desktop. The file that gets spit out with this insert is also on the desktop. And it absorbs the name. So it's called contact ID, but then we give this underscore ID save 0. If we use this file again today, it'll be contact ID underscore ID save 1. Okay, if we were to use it again to do another insert. So if we used it to finish out the records, the next file that would be spit out would increment into underscore ID save 1. Okay, so on inserting, remember you can right-click at field info. After you've mapped a field, you can right-click and transform it with some of the formulas. You can also right-click and add a constant on non-system fields. And remember that because you're the one logged in doing this, if you don't specify an owner, you will be the owner of the record. All right, let's go over and look at updating. Now, updating, obviously, we're working with existing data in Salesforce because you can't update stuff that's not there. So updating is making a modification to an existing record in Salesforce, and to do that, it's going to ask you for the Salesforce record ID, so it can recognize the proper record on which to push the update. You don't have to use the ID. Do we recommend it? Absolutely, because it's almost fail-proof. You're not going to accidentally, well, okay, that's not true. You may accidentally update the wrong ID, but chances are when you're using the ID, you know exactly which record you want to update, okay? And you know where to expect that update to occur. So for right now, for this example, we're just going to function under the pretense that you have to use a Salesforce ID, and then I'll show you how you don't have to. So the key field listed here is the ID. Fine. We're not going to do that. We're going to do contacts. And I don't have my IDs here. So I'm going to load up that file that we just created, this guy, okay? Because I'll have those IDs for the first 15, or the first 10, actually. And that's what we're going to do over here in the control. All right, so I will map over my ID. And the name of the field, they don't have to be identical. This could say bologna sandwich, and I'd map it over to ID, and it's fine. It's looking at the underlying data. Okay, for the auto map to work, they should be pretty similar, but they don't have to. And then, you know what, let's try this. Let me just do another auto map. See how it didn't pick up my ID because it's just named kind of funny? I got to remap that. All right, and so I'm only mapping the fields that I want to update. Do I want to update all these fields? Maybe. But a lot of times an update, we're just mapping 1 or 2 fields because we need to push something over. I'm going to remove a bunch of these fields. And let's say that the update, instead of doing the mailing country in the long form. I meant to actually do it in a 3-character. So I'm going to transform into the 3-character. And the phone, I don't have much data in there, but there's another right-click option you're going to see on an update, and that's update only if the Salesforce field is empty. So only push over this data into Salesforce if the Salesforce field is currently blank. All right, I can do that. Let's do it on email. And you see you just get another little icon that lets you know that something special is going on here. You might not just be able to discern exactly what, but something is going on. For the description, I'm going to map something to the description field because you're going to see a few different options just depending on what the field type is. Where's my account description? I think we moved, or contact description. That's why it's not under account description because we're looking at contacts. I'm just going to map something here. Of course, we'd never actually do this, but you can do the update if empty, and then because this is a certain field type, you can merge it. You can say, well, go ahead and just add what I'm mapping here to what's currently in the system. So the default is that it appends the data you have mapped here to the current data in Salesforce. In Edit and Options, you can choose to prepend the long text merges. So if you want what you're putting in now to come first, you can prepend. You're going to see that merge option on long text area, multi-select pick list, and checkbox true-false field. What happens with the checkbox true-false or a Boolean field when that option is selected? It means if there is a true value, whether it's on the spreadsheet or in Salesforce, keep the true value. So we'll never update to a false with the merge turned on. All right, so let's go ahead and process this. Okay, so we talked about the right-click stuff. I don't want you to forget about that. That set is key I didn't touch on yet because we're going to do that next. But right now we're working with just the Salesforce ID being our key field. Oh, and also I have a restore file here. Okay, so notice that. You can manually uncheck it. I don't know why you would. I like having a restore file. Again, 0 errors, awesome, and then here's our restore file, which are automatically saved under DemandTools data in restore. And I have mine broken down by org ID, so that's why you see that. And the restore file is just for the data that you updated, so it's not going to show you all 32,000 because I said just do 10. And it'll put down the fields that were being modified only. Okay, it's a true restore file. It's not just going to show you everything, it's just what was affected. And it shows you the value that it was prior to the change. Okay, so let's go to that record. And the country is USA. You can see that I last modified it just a minute ago. And then where was my description? Oh, description is here, and my first name field I had unknown, so that's why it's showing up here. There wasn't anything else in here. Had there been, it would have said unknown and then had the rest of the data. Okay, so key things to take away from this. When you're using the Salesforce ID as your key field on an update, you have the benefit of getting a restore file. You have the benefit of it processing in batch, which we'll talk about in a second. You have the benefit of those right-click options for transform and the merge and the update only if blank. All right, those are some pretty big benefits. And again, if you don't have the IDs for records, the Find ID module is awesome for getting them. So it's not, it's not one of those dire situations where you just have no way of obtaining it. All right, so let's talk about what processing in batch is. under Edit and Options, the default behavior when you're doing an update, insert, or delete is that the batch size is 100 records per API call. We all, down at the bottom right here, have a list of API calls we're allowed to use every day, and that's external communications into Salesforce from other applications. Salesforce gives you that threshold, not us, but we want to help you make the most out of those API calls. So based on different triggers and things like that you can have, we found that 100 records being pushed in per API call tends to be very benign. It doesn't really trip off any issues. Most things are optimized to handle that much data. But if you're doing a lot of processing and you really need to take advantage of those API calls, you can up this to 200. So then it takes 200 records per API call. Some of the issues we see with that, every once in a while, it's not guaranteed. It's just that maybe triggers aren't optimized to handle that much. And it's a simple fix by your developer, okay? And in the meantime, you can always lower your batch size. And not that I want to bombard Salesforce with requests, but if your API calls are just too limiting, maybe you're on a new integration and you're just really trying to push hard and get things cleaned up, ask them to increase your API calls. They're pretty forgiving about it. And then they probably will for 6 months to a year and then knock you back down. So the batch size is just telling the system how many records am I going to take over per API call, okay? Which makes processing faster because the more you can do in one call, the less time it's going to take. Okay, so that I think is a nice benefit of using the Salesforce ID among the others that we've talked about. I'm going to clear this scenario. We're still going to go in update mode to contact, but now we're going to pretend that we don't have the Salesforce ID and I'm just too lazy to use find IDs, or I don't know how to use it just yet. And I'm like, you know what, I want to use the email because all I'm doing right now is marking these emails as opt-out. And I don't have an ID, I don't care for an ID. Wherever it finds this email address, mark the opt-out as true, and I can move on with my life. A lot of times people just get record or files of email addresses, and they're told these are opt-outs, mark them as such in Salesforce. So to accomplish that, we are going to actually use the email field as your ID field or your key field. By right-clicking, you can set it as the key, and it's letting you know there's some caveats to this. We allow it. It doesn't have to be any specific type of field, just a field, but it can cause one row in your spreadsheet to modify multiple records in Salesforce. Okay, so if you have, olivia.hinkle@crmfusion.com in your spreadsheet, and then there's 3 records in Salesforce with that email address, when we use it as the key field, all 3 of those records are going to absorb that update. Because it can't, there's nothing unique about it, and it's not looking for anything unique, so that's why it does that. Also, it's going to run a bit slower. Now, we can't do batching here. We have to do 1 record per API call. Okay, so a little bit more of a strain on the system, but not impossible, so it'll run a bit slower. And you're not going to have a restore file, so watch what happens over here when I click OK. Restore is unchecked. All right, and there's no option to check it. But for this, I would map over my email, and then has opted out. Where is that? Email opted out. I think I'm blind. Where is it? No, here, three fields down. So I'm going to right-click, add a constant, and mark them as true. We're just going to do, let's do the first 5. And I will process. No restore files being created. Okay, we're sort of yelling at you here, and we know that. And it's because we want you to hear us. I get nervous about doing updates without a restore file because I like to have a way to reverse it. Something like this where it's just a very simple change, I know how to reverse it. But we want you to be aware that this is just not something we're providing to you because a lot of times we do. Okay to continue. And it's going to start chugging along here. There it goes. So not horrible, but I have 2 errors. Now I can click on my log file and I can see the errors. Key is blank. If this log file is huge though, you've been doing stuff all day, that might be cumbersome to look at. So if I click show error listing, not showing down here. Some of these errors don't show down here, and I honestly don't know why. I've talked to development about it, and I think it's just based on what the error is and how it's getting to us from Salesforce. But if they show up here, it's actually a very nice feature to see because it takes out all the noise of the log file. Okay, but what that means is key field was missing. There was no email address on those records. So how could it possibly know what to update? It was blank. I think this was our first one in the list. Did he have an email? Does not appear that he did. Nope. Let's try this guy. I'm not using that same file, that's why. I am using this file. Okay, so we updated based on this email, and then there's your email opt-out. Now, I don't think there are multiples of these, but let's look. Oh. I don't know if these all have email addresses. I'm assuming they do. We'll just look at the first few here. Email opt-out, modified by me today. Email opt-out, modified by me today. Okay, so that's an example of how it can modify multiple records by one record in your data spreadsheet. Okay, just checking to see if there's any questions. If you guys do have questions, please feel free to fill it out. Okay, so the options with updating are to either use the Salesforce ID field, and you get all those great benefits of the right-click options and processing faster and restore files, or you can use a non-ID field, and you still get, you see the field info, you can still add a constant, you can still transform, but you don't see the update if blank or the merge capability. Okay. All right, before we go into upserts, I just want to point out this process blank. If you are mapping over a field and the field value from your spreadsheet is blank and you want that blank value to be saved in Salesforce, potentially overwriting something that's populated, you have to tell us not only by mapping the field, but also by turning on process blank. Okay, we will not assume that you want a blank value to be saved in Salesforce unless you tell us twice. And you've seen this in MassEffect too if you work over there ever. It's just a safety net we have in place so you're not accidentally blanking out data you don't mean to. Because sometimes you have a field where 6 of the records out of the 300 are blank, and you don't want to blank those out, but you want to update with the other one, and you want to make sure that that blank doesn't go through as an update. So we just said, you know what, we're never going to update a blank value unless you map it and check this box. But all the other populated updates will go through, even if this box is not checked. Okay, so upserting, very similar to updating, except for this time you're mashing up, updating some records and creating new records into one process. For this to function, you do have to have a key field, and the key field has to be one of two types of fields. Either your Salesforce ID field, and you see there's a yellow flag denoting that this can be a key field, or any field that's listed as an external ID. Okay, it's not like update where it can just be any field. It has to be fields of a particular type. And again, that's the Salesforce ID or an external field, ID field. To make your selection of which field, and of course we're not using accounts, we're using contacts. You just right click on the field and set it as the key. And then you get the key icon. When you're using an ID, and this works just the way it does in Data Loader, it becomes really simple because you say, all right, for the IDs that we have, go ahead and do the update. for the records that don't have an ID, we'll do the first, how many were in this one? Yeah, we'll do the first 15 so I can show you. Okay, so the first 10 have an ID. These guys won't. So the idea is that these first 10 receive the update, and these last few, 5, receive the insert. And very simple with an ID because we can insert this and give you the ID back. And you know what, we'll actually, I'm going to auto map this. Okay, and we'll do the first 15 and process. Oh, no restore files being created. That doesn't always mean it's not possible. It just means it's not checked. So make sure, if it is possible, that you just check it off. Okay, 0 errors. We have our log file, of course, and then we have the restore file. So the restore file are for the record that received the update. This file, the original data plus created IDs, has all those records in it, but it has the newly created IDs for the records that we just made. So the way to read this, it says created false. No, these weren't created, they were updated. Okay, was it successful? Yes. These guys were created. Here's their ID that was assigned to them after the creation, and they were successful, so no errors. Okay, and it gives you this contact external ID because it's showing you this is the external ID you used. All right, so pretty straightforward with using the Salesforce ID because, like I said, if certain records don't have the key field, no big deal. It's a Salesforce ID. It can assign it to them as it's creating the record. That's what it does normally, right? Whenever you're creating a record in Salesforce, it assigns the ID. Now with a non-ID field, and I know we're going to go a couple minutes over, so I apologize. Let me clear this out. Oh, we got to go back in upsert mode. It jumps up to update, so be aware of that. I can use my email field, actually is an external ID field, which somebody must have done that recently. So I can right click and set it as the key. And if I map over my email, actually, I'm going to do another auto map here. And let's just take a look. So if we do the first 15, these 2 are going to get errors, these are going to get errors, and these last 2 are going to get errors because I am not fulfilling the external ID, and it's an email address. It's not a field Salesforce controls, so it can't just populate one for me. So it's going to say, sorry, we can't create or update these things. Okay, so we are expecting some errors there. Let's go ahead and process. Okay, so warning on this one, the restore files for upserts based on an external ID field, not the Salesforce ID, can use more API calls. All right, I like my restore files, so I'm just going to do it. If you're working with millions of records, though, or a couple 100,000, you know, you might want to say no. Okay, I've got 15 errors. I'm going to open up the log file, but I want to see if these errors are going to show here. Here we go. Duplicate external ID. Remember on that one that I showed you earlier, right? We had all these guys with that same email. Well, when you're doing an upsert, if it finds more than one record that fits that external ID, it's not going to do it. It's going to shut it down and say, okay, we don't know which record to do the upsert on, so we're not doing any of them. And it gives you the IDs, or email not specified. It doesn't have the ID, so we can't do anything with it. So working with an external ID field that's not the Salesforce ID can be a little bit limiting and a bit more cumbersome. That's why using the ID is just so much easier. So if you haven't attended it, I would go to the Find ID class because finding the IDs is not quite as hard as you think it is. It's just basically deduping, but with a spreadsheet. All right, so nothing got upserted in this process because I just either didn't give it an ID or I gave it an ID that had multiple matches in Salesforce. All right, like I said, I know we've gone over a couple minutes. I do want to be respectful of your time. Those are all the details behind MassEffect, how to work with them, different functions, and different options available to you. The one last point I'm going to show you, hide that, is this update newly added field. If you're not seeing a custom object or a custom field, or maybe you changed a field type and it's just not showing up properly here, this is basically forcing a metadata sync. This is the only module you're going to find this in. It's just because it's robust and it reads from every single table possible. So sometimes you push that, it rereads the metadata, and then now you have either those fields or objects you're missing, or everything's now noted the right way, the metadata has been attached properly. All right, so sometimes, come in here and you're like, oh, I did just create a whole bunch of stuff. Just click it. It'll take a couple minutes and then you'll be done. All right, guys, I do want to say thank you for taking the time out and joining me today. I hope it was helpful, easy to follow, and clear. You will be getting a survey after this class. This is something new that we're doing, and it would be much appreciated if you could take the few minutes to fill it out. I understand we don't always have that luxury in our day to do things like that, which is fine. So if not today, maybe tomorrow, but you will get it. And, we just want to know what we're doing right and where we could do better. And if you guys have any feature requests or suggestions about the product, the survey is more about the training and how it was presented, more about me, I guess, and what I was showing you. But product ideas are always welcome. I would just say to either email me those or log them as a case, and we'll make sure they get routed over to product development. Coming down the pipe, though, we are going to have a more public place for you to do those things, and a more public place to request recordings. So good things coming down the pipe with that. Keep it in the back of your head, and if you have time to fill out that survey, it would be appreciated. But that's it for me. So unless there's other questions that come in, I'm going to end the webinar shortly, but I will hang around for a couple more minutes to answer anything that might be brewing. And if you have a question, really, go ahead and ask. I don't want you guys to walk away confused. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, I just see people dropping like flies, which is good. So I'm going to end the recording, and you guys have a great rest of the week.